You have to click accept. If you want to be a part of that, feel free to turn your video off when you're not talking if you don't want your face to be seen, because this will be potentially posted on the district website. Welcome, I'm Carl Hetler. I was the pastor at Broadway Christian Parish for 5 years and previously at other churches in South Bend. I'm still a local pastor, but working now for the city of South Bend as homelessness coordinator. Sean?
I'm Sean Johnson. I am serving at North Judson United Methodist Church in the North District, as well as Madeiraville and Francisville, but that's in a different district.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Very good. All right, let's go around. Joellen?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Pastor Joellen Chadwick. I've been pastoring at Rolling Prairie United Methodist Church. I signed up for this because we have a fabulous food pantry in our church already that serves many of the different areas around us. And I figured it would be beneficial for me to know more about, how they think and maybe get some hints from you. So I appreciate being here today.
Wonderful. Thanks. Bob Vale?
My name is Bob Vale. I'm the pastor at Middlebury First United Methodist Church. And we are looking maybe to start a food pantry ministry.
Okay, great. Jane?
I am Jane Harper Alport. I am a member at Hammond First, where I am church council chair and working on being the outgoing finance chair. We too have a very large food pantry out of our church, and we are exploring merging with another congregation and are going to be challenged about what our location is going to be. But we are also, I want to say, on a hopeful path coming out of COVID, looking at ways that we can be truly missional into the community rather than just expecting people to come to us. So I'm very much looking forward to the session today. I've served with Sean Johnson on Board of Ordained Ministry, so we're so glad to hear that Sean was going to be partnering with you, Carl. And I want to apologize to the whole group that unfortunately I'm going to need to leave at what will be 10:30 Eastern time to attend a funeral of a congregant from our congregation. So thank you so much for leading today.
Great to have you here, Jane. John? You can hit that unmute button, John, introduce yourself if you're able to. If not, we'll go to the next person and come back to you later if you get that unmuted. All right, let's go to Joyce. You hit that unmute button, Joyce. If not, we'll try Julie and Lisa.
Hi there. I'm Lisa. This is Julie. We go to North Church in South Bend. We're just open to all learning opportunities right now. The academy is hoping to do that.
You're breaking up a little bit. Say what church you're at in South Bend again.
First Church downtown.
Okay. Great, thanks. Glad you both can be with us. All right, Joyce, you're unmuted now. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Joyce, you want to try talking?
He is talking.
Okay, don't hear Joyce. All right, let's try who's next. Preston, can you unmute and introduce yourself? What church you're with?
Hi there. Hi, I'm Preston. I live in South Bend. I church out at Leidick United Methodist. We have a once a month food pantry that's pretty successful. We usually see about 70 people, give away a little over a ton of food, which is always awesome. Always looking for a way to make it hard on my other coordinator to bring more people in.
Great. Glad you can be with us. Wayne, you able to unmute and tell us where you're coming in from? Hit that unmute button. No, okay. I see Dorothy has also joined us. Dorothy, where are you coming from?
Napanee United Methodist.
Very good. Are there any current food pantry programs you have there?
Open Door is one we have in Napanee.
Okay, great. Very good. Well, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. John and Joyce, if you're able to figure out the unmute button at some point and want to share where you're from, otherwise feel free to just listen in. That's fine also. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what we do at our two locations, both at previously at Broadway in South Bend and with some other churches, including First and Clay, and Sean's Kids Closet program. After we do that and answer any questions you have, we'll talk about why we do this, sort of the theology and the guidance based in Scripture and our values that motivate the why, and give you a chance to ask questions about that. We'll then talk about how we do these things, what our goals are, and some of the broader questions to help you think through. And then finally, there'll be an opportunity for you to share more about where is God calling you after we've had a chance to share. Maybe they'll stimulate some of the topics already we've talked about establishing things or growing things, or maybe even making shifts and changes. We're going to take about half an hour for each of those different 4 points, as much as there is conversation to be had, to be able to talk about those things. So any questions before we get started? All right, I'm going to start by sharing my screen then. Can you all see that photo there of Broadway Christian Parish? Great. So this is the previous interim pastor who served for 6 months after me. There in the middle, Steve, with our food pantry director, Reed on one side, and Ricardo on the left, who's one of our guests, who has volunteered and helped out a lot that we'll talk about. And so Broadway currently has another interim pastor that's serving for another 6 months, and we're hoping when the bishop returns from sabbatical that they'll be able to appoint a full-time person there July 1st. This is the hospitality room where Broadway serves up to 130 people now, 4 mornings a week. And so it gets pretty crowded in there. This is a photo of their Epiphany party, because we try not to take photos of guests without their permission, but just give you a sense of the space that we fill, that has lots of people there, and lots that is going on. They serve breakfast 4 mornings a week. We have different meal teams that come in to help out from different United Methodist churches and other groups also. And one of the things that we've recently shifted doing with more people, when we were only doing 30 to 70 meals during the height of COVID, we could plate each person individually and bring it to them at their seat at their table. That helped keep people from crowding around, and was lower numbers and easier to do that. But as numbers have gone up above 100 a day, we've had to do more of a meal line that people just come up and plate out of big containers right onto their plate to make things easier and get food served a lot faster. But one of the key things that Broadway tries to do is involve our guests. And this applies not only for meal service, but for food pantries also. To think about how can you engage people so that's not just a one-way relationship. So you see Steve there, you see some guests in the background are helping clean up and helping serve coffee and work together. And so we have directions, let people know how to handle things, to make it clear to people what they do with different items and different ways that they can help out. We communicate that, and these slides are put on a large screen TV in the hospitality room so people can see and be reminded throughout the morning about what's going on and how they can help out. Here's another one of our guests, Kendall, who helps out with showers and laundry and telephone. One of the ways guests who are well organized and are friendly and can keep track of time can help people out, getting through the shower, helping them do their laundry so that don't try to do too much at one time, and having a telephone for people to make calls also. Broadway started doing all of this some 40 years ago with just a Sunday dinner after worship. And as they saw more needs in the community, it grew to a cold breakfast, and then doing a hot breakfast, and then all these additional services with a shower room and adding laundry that's expanded in telephone. And so it's really grown over the years in all that that happens there at Broadway. We have a different community advocate who helps. So this is Marshall. He was on our leadership training 2 weeks ago and shared some about the work that he's doing. He's also a guest that comes regularly for breakfast in the past, but started taking classes at Ivy Tech and doing an associate's degree in human services and did an internship at Broadway and now continues to volunteer as the main community advocate, meeting with people. And so it's great for someone who has some of those lived experiences, who knows what it's like to deal with hunger and food scarcity, to be able to help others and provide that advice. And so Marshall will meet with people who need help filling out paperwork to apply for different programs. Some people even need help getting documentation so they can get identification. They'll apply for housing and jobs. But then one of the shifts that Marshall has really done in the past year is just spend more time listening to people, just having a listening ear that people can sit down and talk about their struggles and have someone who can express care and give them time and attention. That makes a big difference. And so Marshall's been doing a great job of that at Broadway. Our office administrator works up in the office. We also do mail, which is kind of another unique thing. There's about 800 folders of people who get mail at Broadway. 50 to 60 a day come to check their mail. And it's a great way, you think about not having safe, stable, secure housing. You need some place to get those checks and packages. And if you're moving around a lot, to have one place that your mail can always come makes a big difference and a big help. So Brenda helps deliver mail and sort that and pass that out with her husband who volunteers, and then also answers the phone when people call with questions and need to know about different services or different resources. She does a great job of that. Here's Reed again, who works in the food pantry. And one of the great things that Reed has done is really improve our fresh food, fresh offerings. We shop at the Food Bank Northern Indiana once a week and cultivate food rescue 2 to 3 times a week, and maybe twice a month, or Reed goes down to Milford also when we're in need. But one of the things he's focused on is getting fresh fruits and vegetables. We found that bananas are great, and they're a soft food that people who have dental problems can chew, but things like apples also that people can cook with are very shelf stable. And one of the great things Reed introduced was onions. Onions are something that are very shelf stable and that everyone cooks with, and is a great way to add flavor and texture and nutrients also. And so that's been a big part of what Reed has been working on, helping do that. And so we do monthly boxes for 3 days a week, and people can come once a month for that. Then we also have to-go bags because some people don't have a way to store food or to prepare food. And so ready to eat things with pop tops and individually wrapped is another thing that Reed passes out throughout the week. We used to do that 4 mornings a week when we served breakfast, but there was just too much demand that we've seen grow in the past year that the shelves are just too bare given our supply and the donations that come in. We have lots of people who donate, not just the members on Sunday, but lots of other churches do regular food drives to bring in donations, and other individuals do donations also. Pre-pandemic, I was kind of against doing food drives because I felt like we could always get things cheaper from the food bank. You know, meat for 19 cents a pound, lots of free cereals and other things. But as demand has increased after the pandemic and as there's less federal funding, the food bank often is limiting how many boxes we can take each week, how much food that we can get to pass out. And so we've encouraged more food drives because there's a lack of resources, even at our main central location that we can pull from or even pay for. They just don't have enough that's coming in. So we've started to do more food drives and encourage more organizations, schools, nonprofits to help us by doing that. We still provide masks. We've had a couple COVID outbreaks where people have tested positive, both at Broadway and at our shelters in South Bend. And so we're still trying to increase awareness about that and provide for that that safety. So that's something that we're still aware of, dealing with a vulnerable population that can struggle with it, with their health and have complications. We have a lot of different service providers who come in because we're a community hub. So this is a photo of some of our St. Mary's nurses who come in once a week as part of their internship to provide some basic healthcare questions and answers. They also check blood pressure. And we have lots of different healthcare agencies that also stop in. Indiana Health Center, Anthem, Blue Cross, Oak Street Health is a newer senior care program, HealthLink. So lots of different groups come in because we're a hub where lots of people come, and it's a great way for people to not only get medical attention and direction, but also set appointments, sign up for services also. And one of the things that we started doing in the pandemic was having a greeter because we were wanting to welcome people and follow COVID protocols. But Clara has been great because she herself has been homeless in the past and knows a lot of people on the street because she's been an advocate for a long time. And so she's a great friendly person to greet everyone, direct them where they need to go, answer initial questions, help de-escalate problems. She is a great person to start everyone's interaction at Broadway. We also have a clothing room. And so we have some volunteers who sort clothing and pass that out. One of the trade-offs that we have by having everything sorted and run by volunteers is that we bring people items and it may not be exactly what they want or are hoping for. Some places prefer to have clothing that guests themselves can come in and look through, but the trade-off then is often things get more disorganized and messy. And so it's sort of that trade-off you have to decide about. Do you want accessibility or do you want organization? Whether that's for clothing or for food also. And so it's one of the challenges that we try to balance and make it recognizing a conscious decision that we make. But Kathy and Judith do a great job of keeping everything organized, getting ready to hopefully soon pull out some of those spring bins for some warmer weather. And so they organize that. And this has been a great way for place for people who are doing community service, who need to do community service hours, will often come in and help out in the clothing pantry because there's lots of clothing to sort, and it's a great way for people to be able to help out. We did have a bed bug infestation a number of years ago, and so thankfully a local business owner donated a dryer to us so that we could dry on high heat any items that we thought were suspect to make sure we didn't have any more bed bugs transmitted in our donations. And then finally, in our slides, we let people know about spiritual opportunities that are going on. And we'll talk more about the why of why we do this, but we let people know about men's study that goes on, the Bible study that looks at the lectionary passages for the day, and then our worship service that always has communion as a center part of that. And we'll talk about why that communion is so important in what we do. But that's a brief overview of Broadway's outreach services. And I'm going to stop sharing and give Sean a turn to share.
Thanks. Pick this up. All right. So as we begin, just point out that we share the context of the ministries we're in because that's where our experience is, not to necessarily say that this is what you have to replicate, but by sharing what we do, I hope is to then inspire you to think about how you can apply some of the same concepts in your setting. I also mentioned that Kids Closet, which is ran by North Judson Methodist Church, is in a lot of ways is very different than what Broadway Christian Parish does, and can be opposite in some ways, in fact, because Broadway Christian Parish is in an urban setting. North Judson is a rural setting. Broadway Christian Parish has a broad focus on a smaller geographical area, where Kids Closet has a narrow focus for a wider geographical area because we service all of Stark County. So what Kids Closet does is we meet the needs of children from birth to 18. Our primary focus is on clothing, but we also supply school supplies and we meet other needs as well. Really, our idea is if a child needs it, we'll try to find a way to provide it. And so we do keep kind of finding ourselves expanding to meeting these other needs that come up. So some of those other needs we meet, for instance, are we do provide take-home bags of food for children in one of the elementary schools. So every weekend we send a bag of food home. We have a small number of beds available to give to families. We specifically provide beds usually in situations where a grandparent or other family member has had to become a guardian of a child in fairly quick order, and they may not have things like a bed for the child, so they can call us and we can get to them pretty much right away. And this year we expanded to help provide emergency Christmas help for families because the program that existed in the county was not able to meet the demand, and we're looking at expanding into providing more diapers and infant care because we're finding that's a growing need as well. So the process, the way it works is we work directly with families to meet custom needs. So we don't provide a one size fits all approach. Instead, we find out exactly what the family needs and work to get it to them. We rely on donations from the community. So we have 2 locations within the county where people can drop items off. One is in North Judson at our dedicated facility. The other is at Knox United Methodist Church, which is the county seat. It is volunteer driven, so there's not really a dedicated staff person or anything like that. It's everyone who really works with Kids Closet is a volunteer. We do work out of a dedicated facility. So it started off in the church basement and got too big for the room it was in, and then kind of took over the entire church basement and got too big for the church basement. And through God's providential care, we were blessed with being able to purchase a building down the road to house the ministry in. And we do deliver the clothes directly to the child. So the way it works is when a family has a need, they will call the church, and we'll get them in contact with a volunteer who does the intake coordinating. That volunteer finds out exactly what they need. Then other volunteers will pack the items, and when it's all ready, a third volunteer will then directly deliver those clothes to the child. In the pre-COVID days, we would do that by going to the house where the child lives and do it and meet directly where they live. Since then, we have transitioned away from going to people's houses to having people meet us at various locations. So we did in our dedicated facility, we did build a dressing room area, but we also have partner churches throughout the county that the volunteers can meet the families at. And when they when they do this, the child is to try on the clothes to make sure they fit. That way, if they don't, or if the child just doesn't like it, especially we find this with older kids, especially they have a bit more refined taste of what they want to wear. And so if they're not going to wear it, we want to know that so we can get them something they'll actually wear. So the child tries on the clothes, and we've also we've also found that we do that creates an instant sense of ownership. It becomes those kids' clothes, and that we found that helps ensure that the clothes get to stay with the child. And so the picture you see, that is the clothes going out for delivery. That is everything that is going to from North Judson to Knox. So somebody was loaded up their car early in the morning, was going to Knox to work, and volunteers were then going to come throughout the day to get the clothes and then for those deliveries. So that is kind of what we do.
Great, thanks, Sean. We're going to pause here. So if you have any questions about Kids Closet or Broadway, specifically about what we do, or questions about how we do that, the logistics of that, feel free to ask any clarifying questions before we go on to the why.
I would be interested to know, I realize that both of you, Carl and Sean, have had these major outreach ministries going on for some time. When you started them, how large a team did you start with to be the catalyst genesis kernel to get things going? And were the folks who began the project all members of your congregation, or were you connecting with other congregations?
Go ahead, Sean, you want to start?
Yeah, so Kids Closet began in 2013, I believe. And the way it began was a woman who is a member of the North Judson Methodist Church, um, has a lot of compassion for children, wanted to do something to help them, and so she started by asking a single teacher if there was a need for, I think it was coats and shoes, with in children that she saw within the grade level that she was teaching, and there was, and so this woman kind of went to the church council and was like, I think this is a need that we can meet. I'm willing to, and she was willing to do all the work. She just asked for the church's blessing and space. And so they provided a room in the basement. And so it kind of started with one person serving one grade level of one school. And from there, it quickly expanded to be the entire elementary school. And from there, the entire school system. And from there, the entire county. And from there, it moved on from just clothing to everything else. So it grew very organically. And as it grew, more people from the church became involved. And as it grew, and other churches began to find out, kind of hear about what we were doing. People from those churches wanted to help, and quickly, and so we now have volunteers from not just from this church, but from a variety of churches. So it started with one person and helping one classroom, and like I said, grew from there very organically.
And I can think about 3 different ways that new programs within All That Broadway does get started. So like one is by like the pastor. So I think about like some of the youth ministry that I started at Broadway to try to engage with the youth, because that was really, my passion, and living in the parsonage. I was right there in the neighborhood. And it was a struggle to get more people involved, because they were mostly, different generation and didn't live in the neighborhood, didn't have that calling. And so sometimes when the pastor starts something, it can be hard to get that buy-in from others, especially if it's in their wheelhouse and what more there's their individual gifting and calling and specialty. Sometimes members start different programs also. I think about our Christmas Jubilee program that was started by really one member. And the problem there can be, you have a member who's very passionate about something, and then sometimes has a hard time sharing with others because they are dedicated. They've done lots of sacrificing of finances and time and energy to get a program started, and then have a hard time sharing with others. And so we've gone through a hard transition with the Christmas program, especially with the pandemic, and essentially having to outsource it to an outside group because, this one person kind of ran it and never really involved others. And so when they were no longer able to do it, there was no one else who'd been trained. So there's definitely that sort of larger work that has to be done to get a passionate member able to work with others so things are sustainable. And the third example I think about would be outside people that come in. Like we have someone passionate about doing healthcare, who's a nurse. And so they come in and we have to try to figure out, can they fit in and work with that setting? And the nurse example works because that's a need. A more challenging one has been someone who signs people up for free government phones. And that can be a little more disruptive, can sometimes lead to arguments and fights. And so we have problems sometimes with someone from the outside who wants to come in and offer a service. And if they haven't aligned, as we'll talk about, with like our vision and our values, then there can be conflict. And so you have to weigh what is the good that they bring with, is there going to be conflict down the road between them? So those are 3 examples I think about starting a new program and how it starts. And obviously I think the best thing is to have a mix of all 3. You want the pastor involved, you want member buy-in, and you want even outside people willing to come help make it successful and reach the community. And so just to share some of the challenges that happen if you only have one of those 3, that's really getting something started.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great question, Jane. Any other questions about what we do at Broadway or Kids Closet before we go on? And feel free, if you'd prefer, to just put things in the chat. The chat here is just for our breakout room. So feel free, if you'd rather just type something in the chat, a question you have or a comment anytime, feel free to use that also.
I'm going to ask one other quick administrative question. you can tell this is the lawyer, church council chair, finance person in me. Are your organizations separate 501c3 incorporated, or are they direct ministries under the budgets of your church?
Broadway's is within its budget. It's all done within the church.
Kids Closet is not a separate organization. It is within under the church's budget. That being said, it kind of has it's kind of its own little silo of the budget, but it still operates underneath the church.
Would
There's
that go ahead.
There's another question that goes along with that about how you do budgeting. And my view has always been that the board sets the budget and funds for all these different ministries that I talk through, and that people give to the general fund to fund those things. And we really I personally try to avoid people giving to any one of those agencies, saying cash is to go to this, because we don't want to create all these different silos for all the different things that I shared about. And so sort of the trade-off we have told people is, if you want to give to the food pantry, to the clothing, to the laundry ministry, buy actual items, buy laundry detergent, buy clothes, to donate, buy the food you want to donate to support. That if you want to get items in kind, then that will go to that specific ministry. But if you just give a check to Broadway, it's going to go into the general fund. We really try not to earmark funds to have people have to then feel like they're having to fight and do their own fundraising to fund the needs that they have for their ministry within Broadway. But that's a trade-off. The other groups do it differently. Otherwise, people do have line items that they can give to, but it's just sort of a decision about how do you view, are things all separate, or are they all part of a larger ministry and work together? What do you all do, Sean, with a Kids Closet? Is it siloed then, separate?
To a degree. So I mean, there are some things like, so for instance, like the insurance over like the building or is paid for as part of the church's insurance. But Kids Closet does as we'll talk about later, we have 3 major fundraisers for Kids Closet. So that's all kind of dedicated to Kids Closet. We also apply for a lot of outside grants to fund Kids Closet. So those obviously go directly to that. And so for those purposes, since we have these fundraisers that are beyond the local church, because other churches contribute and help with those, and we have these grants, we found it easier to kind of let Kids Closet kind of be, like I said, its own silo, because it, so that we can honor those funds and kind of keep it cleaner and not have to worry about things getting mixed up and maybe getting in legal trouble down the road, especially with grants and stuff like that.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? We're here to interact. So if there's another question you have, feel free to ask it again by unmuting and verbally, or put it in the chat. If not this time, we're going to go on and let Sean talk a little bit about the why of a Kids Closet.
About why we do it, because obviously churches, we are not community services. We're not government organizations. We have a reason why we do these things. So I think we should start with scripture, and I would say these are the scriptures that kind of really are behind the why we do these outreach ministries. I'm not going to read them to you. You can see them. But there's one from James about our faith is lived out in our actions. And we also find a lot of value in the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew about whatever we do for the least of these, we do for Jesus. And then for Kids Closet specifically, we put a lot of value in Matthew 19:14, where Jesus said to let the little children come to him. So we also see a value in serving children. And so while scripture is the driving point, I would say there kind of is a Kids Closet philosophy, which is it's about more than clothes. So as a church, this is how we are disciples of Christ transforming the world. And this is Kids Closet is the vehicle through how our faith community puts our faith into action. And when it comes to Kids Closet, we try to have very high standards. We want to make sure that what we are giving these children is our best. And so, like I said, when we get donations from the community, and every Wednesday and then usually on Saturday, there are volunteers who kind of who kind of go through and process these to make sure they're appropriate. And so we have high standards. When we say new or like new, we really tried to hold to that. So I think they said for like, if you imagine a garbage bag full of clothes, for every 4 to 5 of those, we get 1 garbage bag worth of clothes we can use. And it was kind of all said and done. And the reason why some of these clothes don't get used is because, again, we serve children, so we sometimes get elderly people who clear out their closets, and while they donate great things, there's not anyone under the age of 18 who's going to wear these sweaters. So we have some partners. There's a Stark County Resource Center that we pass some of those clothes on to. However, sometimes people don't always, while they donate well-meaning, sometimes people give out of their excess instead of giving their best. And so we kind of weed some of that excess out. We've had different partners in the past who we can give some of those to. Sometimes stuff just does end up going to Goodwill. And unfortunately, sometimes the stuff we are given is in such condition, it just goes into the trash because that's kind of what it is. So we do try to keep high standards. And we've found by keeping these higher standards, we have been able to meet non-physical needs. So these children need clothes, but when they receive the clothes from Kids Closet, for some of these kids, it is sometimes the first time in their lives they have been given new clothes. And we've seen time and time again, when we give these kids clothes, and it makes a difference because they've spent the whole life having these hand-me-down clothes and these hand-me-down shoes, and because somebody was able to donate them, we're able to give a child a new pair of Nikes, and so now they feel like they fit. They no longer go to school feeling like having, especially for older kids, kind of feeling this social pressure, knowing that they are wearing they're wearing these hand-me-down shoes that weren't that great to begin with, and instead now they have new shoes that kind of what everyone else has. And so there is a kind of a measure of dignity we're able to help give and restore and help kind of fight against some feelings of social stigma that some of these kids might have just because of the clothes that they've only had access to for their entire lives. And ultimately why we do all this is because we love God, and one of the ways that we seek to love God is by loving others, because Jesus told us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we try to give these children the best we can as an expression of our love for God. So that's why we do it.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Sean. I've actually got some new slides I'm going to share that Sean actually hasn't even seen yet, that sort of expand on the why of what Broadway does and behind that. So I wanted this to be a little interactive opportunity here that you can unmute or put it in the chat. Sorry. Why do people lose their housing? This is sort of a brainstorming question. Can you think about different reasons why someone might lose their housing, why they might show up at Broadway on a Monday through Thursday? What might be a reason that someone would be in need?
Something that I thought about, or put it this way, had not thought about until our church explored the possibility of offering space to homeless people a few years ago. Didn't work out. I won't go into all of that. But one thing I learned at that time is that often people who serve in the military for any length of time have left and been deployed and come back and may not be able to find a job and don't have housing. So for a short period of time, they need housing. And I was also learning at that time, I forget whether this statistic, Carl, you would probably know whether this is still valid, but I learned that something like 50% of the individuals in the United States who are homeless are only homeless for about 6 months or less. So the perception that people are homeless for years and years is not necessarily true.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of short-term homelessness that has to deal with economic reasons, like Jane's talking about, not being able to find a job, not finding being able to find a place to rent is a big thing. Julie and Lisa say, yeah, job loss, losing your job is a big one. Also that impacts you economically, and then medical issues would be an example of something else that can happen. Great. Unexpected divorce. So a relationship challenge. Thanks, Bob, for sharing that. Can be a problem there. And then losing their home. If that's like your landlord raises the rents because rents are going up, or if you're on an adjustable mortgage and interest rates have gone up, that can impact you. Or your assessed value goes up and so your taxes go up, property taxes go up a lot. Those are other financial things that can happen. Any other ideas or examples people can think of why someone might lose their housing and be in need of a help from a place like Broadway? Okay, well, we made a whole list of the ones that we came up with and categorized them in 3 ways: personal issues, relationship issues, and money. So you can see a whole bunch of different reasons that people may be in need. And I often do this with my presentations across the city because I want us to understand how varied it can be. There's so many different reasons someone may lose their housing and be in need. And so we shouldn't think everyone's the same. As Jane was saying, some people are dealing with long-term chronic homelessness and other people it's short-term. And we should realize how complex the issue can be also to provide needs. But then also why I have us do this list is so that we realize that we can think about the people in our churches, and we can probably think of people who fit in most of these categories who are in our churches or definitely in our community around us. And it's a reality that should also humble us and give us some empathy that any one of us might lose our housing. Any one of us might have one of these issues that happen to us outside of our control that causes us to lose our housing and be in need of help from others. And so that's part of the why of Broadway, and more broadly what we're trying to do here in the city of South Bend is recognizing that we need a network of care for people because there are so many different challenges that people face, and that we need to realize that we want to be able to care for ourselves too and create that place of care because we might be in need someday of help with housing. Superintendent Marty mentioned this in her opening devotional about the childhood experiences that often can lead to challenges. She gave the example of one of the girls who survived the bombing and how that trauma that she went through, that physical violence that she experienced, impacted her and led her to turn to drugs and alcohol in her adult life. And the reality is that research has been done on these 10 different categories. And for most people, we probably have 1 or 2 of these that we experienced growing up. But one of our local shelters did a survey of all their residents and found that the average score was 6.5 for those that they were housing out of homelessness. And so it's a recognition that for a lot of the people that we're working with, we may wonder, why don't they just get a job? Why don't they just stop doing drugs? Why don't they stop hanging out with these bad people, these negative influences? There's a lot of trauma that people have experienced that has caused them to do harmful things themselves, to have dysfunctional practices, to not be able to break out of the cycle of poverty and homelessness. And so the why of why Broadway does so many things when it can seem like just like a free handout for people who should be able to take care of themselves is we recognize that people have experienced a lot of hardships, a lot of difficulties as children, and that they need support and care, and they need compassion. And there was a time when I first came to Broadway when neighbors were trying to shut us down because they were annoyed with all the people coming into the neighborhood, walking, taking the bus, bicycling. And so we really had to talk about the why of providing these basic services to people who were in need, but then also working with them to find ways they could still be good neighbors. And so just because someone has experienced trauma and hardship doesn't excuse bad behaviors. We still work with them to improve that. And we earned a lot of respect from the neighbors and cleaned things up really well. So the neighbors now enjoy having us in their community because Broadway's in a residential neighborhood. But it took this compassion of understanding the difficulty people have been through and the hardships that they have faced and how that impacts them. And for those of us who don't have a lot of these difficult childhood experiences, we may not understand why someone acts the way they do. But this helps us have some compassion and understanding. And this really motivates what Broadway does in their ministry. Two scriptural examples that I think of. One is the Good Samaritan. And it's a familiar story that I won't take the time to retell. But you think about who saw the person that was in need. All three people, the religious leader, the political leader, the outcast Samaritan, they all saw the person in need, but only one person stopped to help them. And that really has been what has motivated Broadway over the past 40 years, is seeing the people who are in need and doing something to help them, to provide for their needs, provide in the crisis when someone is bloodied and injured, because they show up that way at Broadway with their clothes ripped and needing help. But then also that transformative care that the Samaritan provided at the inn, that long-term rehabilitation to make sure all of someone's needs were met so they were restored to wholeness and able to continue on their journey. That's part of also that picture of what Broadway is that place of an innkeeper who continues to work with people day in and day out, week in and week out, to help connect them with the resources that they need to bring them back to wholeness. It can sometimes be difficult because people will leave Broadway and we don't know what happens to them. But it's always encouraging when we get letters from people to let us know that they found housing in some other area and they've moved into that, and that's why they're not at Broadway, or that they're working and they stop by maybe on their day off and say they haven't been there for a while because they've been at work and all the times when we usually are open. And so it's encouraging to hear those successes and be reminded about the impact that we have by seeing people's need and then working to meet that need. And then finally, I think about Romans 12, that gives us guidelines of what it really looks like to love our neighbor and what that means to be able to care for one another, to be devoted to one another, to be joyful in hope that even when there's challenges and people fall back into addiction and into violence, that we still are patient with them and we keep praying for them, and that we truly practice hospitality. That's why we call that our hospitality room that we have for people. And even when people don't agree with us or disagree with what we're doing, we're still practicing hospitality and trying to care for them and blessing people even when they disagree with us. I'll finish up here, and then I'm going to answer Julie and Lisa's question. We want to rejoice with those who have successes and also mourn with those who mourn. We see about 20 overdose deaths a year, people we know at Broadway, overdoses and then like violence and medical issues. And so we're constantly grieving. And I keep a list. I restart every All Saints Day, November 1st. There's already about 10 people on the list so far that we'll remember when we come to our next All Saints Day. So there's a lot of grieving that we do together. You saw one of the reasons why people lose their housing is mental illness. In South Bend, we have a new program that's run by Oaklawn, one of our mental health providers. It's a mobile crisis team. It used to be in the past, our only option was to call the police, and that involves lethal force. That isn't always the right need for people having a mental health crisis. So Oaklawn has a mobile team that we can call to come out to be able to help de-escalate, that can transport someone if they need to get somewhere, or even bring them to Oaklawn for an evaluation or for a medication refill. And so that's made a huge difference. And so we were calling them about once a month when someone's in a mental health crisis, and our staff that they would do some training really needed that. And we're getting ready later this month. The city has been investing in opening an actual center that's going to be a stabilization center that the crisis team will work out of. And people can come in for a voluntary 23-hour hold. And we have 16 recliners that people will be able to stay in. And right now, the mobile team has expanded. They're doing 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. They're hoping to go 24/7 because there's mental health needs throughout the day. We know it can happen anytime. And one of the biggest things that we think that will help with is our weather amnesty. That's an emergency shelter in South Bend that serves between 50 and 80 people. We've seen the range so far this winter. And some of those people are having mental health crises, but there's nowhere else for them to go. And the staff at Center for the Homeless try to work to keep them calm and give them space to stay warm for the night. But it's really hard sometimes. And so having Oaklawn open the center later this month is going to be a huge help, especially at Weather Amnesty, to give people a place where they can get that evaluation, they can get some medication, and still have a warm place to stay overnight. So we're really excited that the city is invested in opening that next week. So that's kind of the why of what we do at Kids Closet and Broadway. What other questions do you have that you want to ask either verbally or again in the chat. I'll say one other thing about the unique approach for mental illness is privacy concerns, right? We want to respect someone's privacy. And so what we've started to do is we have Oaklawn's release of information on site at Broadway. So if we're having to call them to come out and talk to someone, we ask our guests, are you willing to sign this release of information so that the staff can follow up with us and let us know what the case plan is, what the treatment plan is, if you're ready to come back into our community. And so that's been a really helpful way to be proactive, to respect someone's privacy, but to try to have that communication because mental health needs can be very unique. And we want to try to be as open and knowledgeable as possible as our guests will allow. Any other why questions that people want to ask? One other thing that I will share then is what we're trying to do as a collective here in South Bend. I forgot to do this slide. So let me share this again. So we are forming a collective that involves not only Broadway and First, but Clay and Evangel Heights and Grace all have, you know, a different ministry that they're running. But then we also have Emmanuel and River Park and Leidick that are a part of the larger South Bend area. And so we've been working for the last couple of years to come up with a collective of what we can be doing together. And we're going to have our first training next Sunday. And all the South Bend area churches will have this information I send out to the pastors this week. But this is our goal, to try to work together. Broadway for a long time was a line item in the conference budget, and it's since shifted to having to raise its own support. And so we have a lot of United Methodists who come in to volunteer and support, but then other groups also. But we're really trying to develop more of a project together. If you're familiar, have been around South Bend, the Weather Amnesty program I mentioned started by United Methodists about 12 years ago as Project Warm. And that was an opportunity to first provide a winter shelter that wasn't available to anyone at all in the city of South Bend. And so we're gathering again as United Methodists in South Bend to talk about what can we do together to help people who are in need of housing. Is it providing housing? Is it providing more emergency shelter? Is it providing more wraparound services to people? But then also trying to create a collective that allows places for people to grow spiritually. And so there's going to be a housing component that we do as a collective, but then there's also going to be a worship component that we do. And so we had the opportunity on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, December 21st, we all gathered in a neutral location for worship together from all the congregations. And that was a great first opportunity to practice that worship piece of what we do, and to practice that why, that it's our love of God and our commitment as United Methodists that draws us together and then calls us into shared ministry together. And so that's why, as a local pastor, but also as a City of South Bend employee, I'm kind of working to help coordinate all that and help us figure out our next steps. That's a big part of the why of what we're doing together. Any other questions that people have? Or Sean, anything else that you want to add about the why of Kids Closet? All right, well, we will go on to the how then. The how do we do this? How do we make a difference? How do we make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world? This is a big part of the challenge that we do and what we're thinking about trying to do more broadly. And a lot of this involves collaboration with different agencies. And so I'm going to share my screen again to show you a map of all that is going on in the city of South Bend. This is a resource map that I made up at Broadway because we saw a lot of people who were experiencing homelessness for the first time with the pandemic and some economic problems that we've had. And they didn't even know where places were around the city. And I've since now expanded this and adapted this for the city of South Bend. But you can see Broadway there down on the south that serves breakfast 4 mornings a week. Our Lady of the Road serves the weekend breakfast. So they were serving this morning. First Methodist up at the top. does a soup kitchen 3 days a week. And Hope Ministries, there in the center, does lunch and dinner 7 days a week. So you can get a meal in South Bend 3 times a day, 7 days a week. It does involve some walking, but we try to provide that and let people know about that resource. And so it's been an important part of Broadway is recognizing that we can't do everything. We can't serve every meal. We can't meet every need. And so really learning to collaborate with others. It's hard at 10:30 to have to ask people to leave on a cold day, but it's helpful to know that there's places like the county library that people can go to be able to stay warm, and the Century Center that they can go in to stay warm, and Howard Park across the river is another place. And so part of what we've done and how is important is recognizing there's some needs you can't meet. And for those of you who have food pantries, you've probably seen this. You've seen other needs that you can't meet. You've seen other problems or even the need for food that you can't always meet. And so I think it's an important thing to recognize that the how of we do ministry is knowing what our calling is and knowing what our limits are. So Broadway's only open 2.5 hours, 4 days a week. And so it's important for us to know what other places people can go to get food and what other places people can go to stay warm throughout the day. The other thing that we often get challenged with is people need emergency shelter. And the reality is that Broadway doesn't feel comfortable in the residential neighborhood having people stay there in the building overnight. And that's a hardship. And that's a really hard conversation to have with people who are looking for housing and have nowhere to go. And so we refer people to Center for the Homeless that I mentioned does weather amnesty, but also has residential beds. And our Hope Ministries has that for men, women, and children also. And then Our Lady of the Road in the last couple of years has started doing signups for what we call Motels for Now, which is a low barrier or high access, we call it shelter. It doesn't require people to be free of substances before they start staying there, but instead gets them housed and then helps them work through steps of recovery and mental and medical health care that they need so that they can move into independent living. And I'll tell you that it was really discouraging my first couple of years at Broadway to be feeding and clothing and helping people get showers and to then just send them back out on the streets and know that they weren't really being able to break the cycle of homelessness. But once Motels for Now opened, it made a huge difference to get 120 people off the street, out of tents, and into housing, and to start to see successes with them. That really gave me an invigorated purpose for what we were doing at Broadway, to be a part of this network and to see this missing piece, this low barrier shelter opening up. And as they asked about mental health, we're starting to see more needs that are being met there. That Oaklawn building that's getting ready to open is right up here in the East Bank, also not too far from First. But the one missing piece that we don't really have in this map of services concentrated downtown is what we call the social detox, a place where people can go who need to dry out. There's medical detox that involves drugs like Suboxone and methadone, and those are specific clinics that you might see in some communities that we do have in South Bend. Great. Take care, Jane. Our condolences for the funeral that you're going to. But a social detox where people can just dry out, that really isn't available at all. And so what often happens is people either just have to do that on their own on the street, which can be really hard to do, or they go to the jail, which is right here on the south side of downtown. And essentially they have to detox in jail. And so that's really the one missing piece that we're really trying to figure out how we can work with. And we're talking with the sheriff a lot about doing that because that's the missing part of that. The how do people get into housing is addressing that substance abuse piece and giving people that detox opportunity. There's a place down the street from Broadway called Life Treatment Center that used to provide that social detox service. But the success rate nationally and locally is only about 5%. It can take people up to 20 times before they're able to finally stick with getting clean and sober. And frankly, Life Treatment Center didn't like being connected to those kind of statistics and that low of a success rate. And so it is a hardship, and it's a difficulty of how we do ministry, but it's not something that's necessary. And so we're working with the sheriff, and if you're familiar with Faith in St. Joe County, is a big part of what we do. Is trying to work on getting people diversion, what's called a jail diversion program, to move people out of just being jailed and trying to get clean there, but instead move them into a social detox where they can get dried out and try to take new steps. Because if you're gonna get into Hope or the Center or Life Treatment Center or some other sober living places like First Methodist has the upper room for men and women, you really need to detox, and be able to do that locally would make a huge difference as opposed to having to go to Michigan City or Plymouth or up to Kalamazoo. So that's one of the missing how pieces that we're really trying to work on advocating for and getting fit together. Sean, tell us about Kids Closet and how you have such an effective impact on your community.
So I would say the effectiveness really comes from support. And as I kind of mentioned with Jen's question, Kids Closet saw organic growth. So it was not like we didn't just start saying we're going to provide clothing for kids throughout the entire county and just started from there and did it. It started small and built its way up. And again, it wasn't even a plan to do that. It started by seeing a need and meeting the need. And as we began meeting that need, we saw more needs and began meeting those needs, and it did just organically grow. But it is worth saying that if all we did was provide for one grade level of one school, we still would have been effective at meeting that need. And so it doesn't that stuff does not have to be at a whole county or city level. If we are meeting the need we see to meet, then we are effectively doing it. But one of the reasons why we were able to grow and meet those needs as we kept seeing them was because of the support we got. So there is a lot of church support. It all did begin with one woman's vision, but the church really got behind it, and the church continues to be behind it. There are a couple times a year we do fundraisers for Kids Closet. One of those is a fish fry, and that is an all hands on deck event for the church. In some capacity, just about I would be hard pressed to find someone involved with the church on any regular level who does not in some way contribute to that fish fry. It's like I said, it's kind of an all hands on deck, and everyone is involved. And for some people, that is the extent of how they're involved in Kids Closet, but everyone is involved. So the church really does support the ministry. It's not just its own thing that a small handful of people are doing. The whole congregation is behind it. We also have community support. So like I said, we do have volunteers from other churches. We do have donations that the community gives regularly at these two different donation sites we have. And it's not just necessarily support, but I think there's a full community buy-in into the vision of Kids Closet. And this picture I put up here, this is of Taylor. I think this kind of shows this community buy-in. So Taylor's is a teenager. She is fairly creative, and so she has through the internet, she makes her own t-shirt designs and sells them. And when she learned that there was this past December, that when the holidays program in the county was not going to be able to meet all of the demand that families had, and that we were going to try to help do that, she found out about that, and she took the money that she raised from selling t-shirts and went to buy toys for us to give. And so this is a picture of her with the toys that she brought in. And so I think that kind of just really shows the buy-in, because again, Taylor's not is not a member of the North Judson Methodist Church. She is just part of the community, and kind of and heard about what we were doing and wanted to be part of it. And we get to see it. We're blessed to see kind of a lot of that community participation. And then the other part of the support is from networking. We can see this in two ways. So we do seek to partner with as many people as we can partner with. So one of the reasons why we provide weekend bags for the elementary school is because the elementary school said this is a need and asked if we could help meet it. So we work with the elementary school to provide that. So we source it, we pack it, provide it, but then the school itself also does a food drive where they around Thanksgiving, and they specifically I think by this year they did it by grade level. So like the first grade collected peanut butter, the second grade collected cereal, and so it was the way the food that we give out. This food that was a lot of that was donated by the families to support other families. So we partnered with the school. We work pretty closely with DCS in the county. So when a child is pulled from a home in an emergency situation, often the first stop is at Kids Closet, and we give those kids exactly what they need, because they usually leave with just the clothes on their back. So we work with them, and we also do work with other churches. So for instance, I mentioned there are 3 big fundraisers for Kids Closet. There's a fish fry, and then there's a rummage sale. We kind of do those, but the third fundraiser is one that while the North Judson United Methodist Church participates in, we do not organize. Another community church is the one who organizes it and does all of the legwork and does the bulk of the work for it, and all the money that is then raised through that fundraiser is that they give to Kids Closet. So we seek to partner with people, and we've also found that for us, social media has been incredibly effective. Several years ago, using Facebook, they created a Kids Closet Facebook group, and that has gotten up to 2,000 I can't remember the numbers, but it's over 2,000 people who are part of that. So it makes it very easy to get the message out. And we now we do have to moderate it pretty heavily. I think that's part of the key to the success is before anyone who is not a moderator can post, it has to be approved. So we edit out a bunch of stuff that where people try to use it for free advertising for their things. But it has been very effective at getting the message at getting the messaging out. And so quite often when people call the church needing help, it'll be because they'll say that some friend of theirs saw on Facebook, and that's how they were able to find out about how we might be able to provide for them. So for us, we found social media has been very effective as a messaging platform and getting our services out there. So I would say support, though, is really where the effectiveness comes from.
That's great. One other example I'll give about how we try to do the work we do is we do lots of training for our staff and volunteers. And so here's this guy out of Chicago called Ryan Dowd. Does he calls himself the homeless librarian, and he has a whole library of trainings that we subscribe to, that we bought a license for. And it's been a really helpful way for us to train our volunteers when they're dealing with mental illness, as we talked about, or people on a substance, or even people who have a lot of criminal history or just trauma in their past. And so this is just an example of a recent training that we did on respect and sadness. And we sometimes have to tell someone no, that we can't help them, or we have to ask them to leave because they're breaking some of our rules, threatening others, or not following directions from staff. And so thinking about the importance of respect and sadness and how we treat people. And this has been really helpful because with our staff, we see that some of them are coming from more middle-class suburban experiences and can feel either intimidated or can feel like because they just want to help people, they'll let anything go. And then other people that are staff and volunteers, like I've shared about with Roberto or Marshall, have lived the experience of being on the street. And either they have a hard time showing compassion to others because they have improved their lives and just wonder why others don't, or they have a hard time just being kind because of often the difficulty ways people have to live on the street. It requires a lot of aggression to defend yourself, and confrontation to keep others from taking advantage of you. And so what Ryan talks about is how we need to learn how to do respect and sadness. So one of the great things he does is he talks about some of the brain-based research that goes into these ideas, but then he also provides practical skills that we can develop. And so I really like this because it talks about listening and practical ways that we can listen to someone to show respect, what we can do with our hands to be able to show respect to someone. Arms folded when we're talking can show anger. And so he often talks about the contemplative, or empathy pose, where you put your hands like up to your chin, either two of them or one of them, is a way to show that you're listening to someone, but it's a way to also protect yourself if need be, if they're going to try to attack you. And then also volume. Being 25% quieter than someone is a way to help lower the dialogue, and you're not trying to outshout someone, but you're also not being timid, but you're engaging with them at a comparable level, but just 25% quieter. And this has been really helpful tools for our staff and volunteers to practice on listening to someone, to whatever their concern is, to be able to listen. I will say that with mental health, that some people can take a story for 10 or 20 minutes. So at some point, you do have to sort of cut someone off if you have other things you have to get to. And some people are not used to, they grew up in a quiet home, and so they're not used to loud voices. To them, that always just means anger or physical violence. But for some people who have a hard time being heard, or just because of their life experiences or culture, being loud is just a part of the way they interact. And so not being intimidated by that, but recognizing we can just go 25% quieter has been a big help. And then also the sadness, and when we have to ask someone to leave, when because of their behavior, whether it's their mental illness, whether it's the substance they're on, whether they're just aggressive, it sucks that they have to leave, and that they aren't going to be able to get the services they need. They can't stay for a shower. They can't go in our food pantry. And so just conveying that we're sorry about that, not taking delight, not being legalistic, not being judgmental, but really having compassion for someone is an important way to keep things calm, to prevent conflict, and to de-escalate a tense situation. And so again, Ryan gives practical advice, like your tone of voice. In most of American culture, by lowering your voice is a way that we show sadness, whether that's at the end of your statement, I'm sorry that is happening to you. That's a way that we convey sadness. But then also facial expressions. And this was really important during the height of the pandemic when everyone was wearing masks, to think about things like wrinkling our eyebrows is a way in our culture that we show sadness also to someone, that we're showing concern for them. And this has been a really helpful way to the how of what we do to be able to serve people in the food pantry and clothing and meals, to be able to do that. And then one other slide that I'm going to show, because we asked about mental illness, is training on learning to become comfortable with discomforting behaviors. Because the reality is that most behaviors that we see are just discomforting, whether it's someone talking to themselves, standing facing a wall, walking in circles, organizing and reorganizing all the items in front of them, flapping their hands or twirling their hair. These are just discomforting things. And it's important in the how of we do our ministry is being comfortable with mental illness. Another one of the realities of the pandemic that we've mentioned many times is that there's been increased mental health crises for all of us. We all went through this time of feeling depressed and isolated and anxious and uncertain. And especially for those who already had mental diagnosis, have other complications like substance use, it's been even more difficult for them. And so just recognizing that we're going to experience and interact with people with more and more mental health challenges, and we need to be okay with things that are discomforting to us. If the person's behavior is not bothering anyone, but it's not normal for the setting, it's just making you uncomfortable. And so your focus needs to be on reassuring everyone else. And if you're volunteering in a clothing pantry or a food pantry, people are going to look to you as the flight attendant. When turbulence hits on a plane, everyone looks at the flight attendant. Are they sitting calmly with their seatbelt buckled? Are they pulling down the oxygen mask and putting that over their mouth because it's a little more serious and they do something? Or are they freaking out? People look to you as the flight attendant when you're a staff or a volunteer to see how to behave. So if you can model for people that things are discomforting, but you acknowledge that, and that you're able to just smile at people and encourage them, that is a big help for people when there's discomforting mental health interactions that you may experience in your outreach. When things get disruptive to the operations, someone is not following the guidelines for how many items to take from the food pantry, they're becoming confrontational about the clothing that you're offering them. Their goal is to encourage compliance with the rules. And that's when some of the other behaviors we talked about, respect and sadness, are really helpful to go into. And then there's that third level, and this happens pretty rarely, where someone becomes dangerous. People who become dangerous with mental health most likely are going to be confrontational with someone they know, whether it's a relative or a friend. You as a volunteer or a staff member at some outreach program is not someone's become dangerous to. So this very rarely happens, but if it does, this is the time to call in South Bend or in St. Joseph County, our mobile crisis team, call the police if necessary. And Ryan gives some helpful major flags that we rarely might hear, but that they hear someone say, the voices are telling me to hurt people. If they're focused on a specific person, that they're stalking, or if they are talking about ending their own life and have plans and the means to do that, those are major flags that are dangerous that we want to address. So I share this as some more of the how of what we try to do the work at Broadway and deal with people when there's problems and we need to try to de-escalate situations and deal with the reality of mental health challenges. Again, what are the questions that you have about the how? Again, feel free to unmute or type them in the chat. Well, as you think about any questions you want to ask us, Sean and I want to hear more from those of you who have shared already about what you're currently doing with food pantries or thinking about doing, and some questions that can help you think about whether what you're currently doing or what you're thinking about doing in the future is what's the vision and passion of your congregation? What are you really sensing God is calling you to do? What are the things that people are passionate about doing? It may not be like Kids Closet or Broadway. You may have a different passion. And so it's important to recognize each individual congregation and the different vision that God gives us and the passion that you have, the members around you, that really determines things. And what is the mission with clearly defined boundaries? What are you going to do and what are you not going to do? As both Sean and I have talked about, it's really important to have that support. And so as you think more about what you're doing, your mission, what your goal is and your boundaries, then especially as Sean has shared, and also about Broadway, who are the partner organizations and churches who can fill in the missing pieces as you understand how complex, whatever the areas that you're focusing on for your vision and passion and mission, who do you need to support and the network with to be able to do that. So the rest of our time is a chance for you to share more about either what you're currently doing in outreach and questions you have, or as you are contemplating possibly new things, whether it's a food pantry or something else. Would anyone like to share more about where they're currently at and what they're thinking about doing within their local church context for outreach?
This is Joellen Chadwick.
Yeah.
Our food pantry is all these things that you've talked about, maybe not as elaborate and everything, but what I appreciate the fact is that you called people guests. Now, at the food pantry, they call them clients, but I like guest better because it's more about, and as you said, it's more than about the food or the clothes. We have library books that come in and that type of thing, toiletries. It's about the respect. It's about honoring that individual on their walk, no matter whether it's equal with yours or not. I like the fact that when they come in, we have it was a closet that was made into the food pantry, but each client or guest is taken into there individually. So they're honored when they go into that time. It's not just, okay, well, let's hurry up and get this person in and out. So they do spend a lot of time respecting and just making that person feel important just for those 15 minutes that they're there. That might not happen the rest of the week.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like Sean shared with the clothing, it's about more than just the clothes. Yes, you're meeting this felt need, but it's really about the person feeling important and connecting with them is a huge part of that. And I didn't have a good picture of the larger food pantry area, but Reed has it set up as sort of an oval And we have shopping carts, so people can go around with their shopping cart and pick items, and there's guidelines for how much they can take. And we have volunteers who are scattered around the room to help answer people's questions and help them out. And it definitely makes a big difference when people feel important. We can talk to them individually. I'll share one of the things that we're looking to do is grow more items within our Unity Garden. So I'll share a picture of this so you can see this. This is from the cover of our last annual report. Here's Reed outside of Broadway with some of the food boxes that he built and growing different vegetables in there. And this has been a great way to start thinking about sustainability. We've found that having lettuce and tomatoes and potatoes have been really good. High caloric things that we can grow there to have more fresh food. But then our goal is to eventually start having people be able to start doing this themselves and teach them how to build their own little raised bed so they can grow their own vegetables. Because one of the concerns that I have is that we don't want people to become dependent upon the services that we provide. And so we eventually want to get them stabilized and able for them to be independent. I think a big part of that is, people being able to grow some of their own food if possible. Obviously, if you're a renter in certain situations, depending on your layout, it may not be feasible. But as much as possible, that's really where I want to see us grow and develop at Broadway and other food pantries. It's help people develop that independence and self-sufficiency. So thanks, Joellen, for sharing about where things are at with your food pantry there. How many people are you seeing, Joellen, and have those numbers been going up in the past year?
The numbers, well, they have a Thanksgiving, of course, and a Christmas type thing. And of course, then they have people sign up for that and it's more. The numbers are not always stable. I don't know why. I don't know how you figure. I know that at church, personally, I want to make sure that we write down, okay, this Sunday we only had this many people because it rained and the weather was bad. So maybe that could be the reason for that type of thing and everything. But it's an important thing. And you were talking about our area is a rural area, originally in a more rural area where Rolling Prairie is. So we do have people that have overabundance from their gardens, or another lady brings in eggs for people and that type of thing. So it kind of makes the community more involved than just saying, this is the food pantry and it doesn't have anything to do with me, because it has something to do with all of us. And the library brings in books that are no longer in service, and those can go to people. So as for the amounts, I'm not so sure. Wayne, who'd never answered us before, could maybe tell how many people were on there, because Wayne's from our church. But it was started, as you were it was started in the back of someone's trunk, in their trunk, and it expanded to this event, like you were talking with the shopping carts, where we're guided and we're involved in everything like that. So it's a worthwhile thing, and I think we're always trying to, make it better. A lot of people call and say, can I come in? I don't live in that area. And they try to stay to the different townships and everything, but they will, of course, accept somebody and then give them guidance about how to go through that in their own area. So
nice. Yeah. So sort of like one time come in, but then try to direct them to the more local resource.
Exactly.
That's great. I know another thing that Broadway's been trying to do with their food pantries to make it more interactive and cooperative is encouraging guests to bring in recipes of things that they've cooked with the different items that they pick out. That's been a way for people to give back and share. And because we get like a lot of beans, a lot of lentil beans, that just stack up. And so if people are able to share recipes with ways that they've cooked things, that's a way for them to give back and share and create more of a community. And then we've also tried to encourage people to come back another time of the month just to volunteer, that they're coming to shop once a month to see if they can come in one other time in the month to be able to volunteer and to give back. Because the goal is really to try to create more of a community where people are helping one another. We're trying to move away from just being a handout in one way. We're really trying to create more of a community where people care for one another and create that community. But definitely, like Joellen's saying, taking people around individually definitely helps build that relationship and that connection. Do you ever see it leading to people coming and get involved in more the spiritual life of the church there at Rolling Prairie?
Very rarely. It's not, and that's the same thing. Previous to this, I was at First United Methodist Church in LaPorte, and we had a daycare, and the people bring their children, but it's not that often that they become part of the church, unfortunately. But as talking about the food, the couple that runs the food pantry now, if there's you get a lot of squash at a certain time of year and this and that. If there's a strange thing, they do make recipes that people can taste that have to do with this food. Because some of us, I'm from a family where we ate so many different things. It's amazing. But that's not always the case in the family, a lot of the families of these guests that come in. So you have to introduce them to different things and say, hey, try this. It's good. Garbanzo beans, make hummus out of it or something like that, because you've always got those up on the shelves and nobody knows what to do with them.
Right.
So,
for example, thanks, Joellen, for telling us more about ministry and program. What would you say are the greatest challenges that you have at the food pantry going forward?
Right now, they're doing real well with grants and that type of thing, and they've collaborated with Meyer, where if you a program where if I give $10, Meyer will match it. So technically, in the end, it ends up Meyer doubles that and that type of thing. So they're doing well now, and of course, they go to the food bank, which is probably out of South Bend, from Rolling Prairie, and get things like that. The couple, is very energetic, and all the churches that help, like to be involved in everything like that. So I don't know. I don't personally know what challenges they're facing, but I'm sure that there will be some along the way, that will happen.
Yeah. Great. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share more about where their current ministry is, their outreach, and what they're looking to do in the future?
A thing that we hear a lot with our pantry when people come in is that they're always glad to be there. We've seen people come, obviously we're on the west end of South Bend. We've seen people come all the way from Dunlap to come out to see us from word of mouth. They say, we're always happy to come to this one. People are smiling. They're very welcoming and everything. I don't know how there are food pantries out there where they're a little bit gruff with people. Obviously, you gotta set your boundaries still, but it's a thing that we love to hear and a thing that's always fun. We've got regulars that we see and we look forward to seeing every month, and they bring friends and family and other people. So I think it's really important to echo the idea that you've got to put forward the good body language, and to make sure to talk to them as individuals. In our setup, we've got a line of cars, so we've got the ladies who work the cars and talk to them about what they'd like, so we can bring them out and load them up, and they do a very good job about engaging those people and talking to them, finding out where they're at in life, just making them feel seen and understood.
And is it mostly all church members who are volunteering, Preston, or do you have other community people who are helping out? So
in the past, it's been mostly church members. Our main guy, our procurer, I don't know if it's the Wayne that's in this group, but that's the Wayne that we know has got us always hooked up with piles of food, and he's not necessarily a member of our church. And lately, we've been seeing more community involvement. We've had members from the Lions Club actually come in, a couple of members a month, usually helping us out, talking to people, getting a little bit of information as well.
That's a great partnership to have, part of that important networking, like we talked about.
Absolutely.
Have you seen increased need over the past year or so in your community then?
We've had, and I don't know if it's necessarily increased need or if it's because we've had good word of mouth. We've had like a slight uptick to a point where we're consistently in the 60 cars, 60 families basically helped out up to 70. I think we had 70 this last time, which was good, because in February, or January, we're thinking, okay, it's after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, maybe we see a little bit of a fall off, but that wasn't the case this time, fortunately. Well, I mean, at least in my opinion, fortunately.
And you're open just once a month, is that right?
Yep, one Saturday a month. That's right.
And people stay in their cars, you just load pre-boxed.
So in the summertime when it's nice, and we're also blessed to have a congregation with a ton of gardeners, so we're able to give people fresh stuff, which is something that I like to do. I know that some people need the prepackaged and they're ready to go, but I like to get people involved in eating fresh food, their own food, doing their own stuff with these gorgeous vegetables that we get sometimes. So yeah, sorry. back to the question you actually asked me. So they come in, and typically during the summer month, we've got a menu for them. They pick the number of items that they want. We take that from their car and send it into our team inside who packs up the bags and gets them ready. And then usually this is the part that I do with the heavy lifting. We take those bags and we load them up for the people so that they can go and take what they need. But in the summer months when we've got extra and we've got stuff in people's gardens, we've got a section beyond where we do the loading where they can park and pull off and get out and come and, talk with us and pick through our free table. We've got coats, we've got hats and gloves and stuff. People need them when they do to try and meet just whatever need that we can see.
That's great. All right, Julie and Lisa, thanks so much for joining us. Glad you get all the information. And we will be posting this online if people want to review anything also. This has been a really helpful discussion. Thanks, Preston. That's really helpful to hear about. Anyone else want to share? I'll go back and address Jane's question. If you remember, she's at Hammond, and they're thinking about merging with another congregation. And Sean, I was wondering if maybe you could speak to that because you work with multiple congregations. How has that worked, and have you had any experiences merging between congregations?
Not with merging, but like I said, we do work with Knox United Methodist Church, and so I guess the two things that worked well for that is first we had to make sure that we had to work together so that we were on the same page with what we wanted to accomplish. And we had to make sure that, and there's also a level of mutual ownership. I know there were people at Knox who were afraid that we were just going to be using them. But they have a level of ownership. So like the box is on their property, and then they have volunteers who kind of go through it. We entrust them to be the ones who process it. So they are equal partners in the ministry. And so I think that making sure that we're being on and I know the Woodmar Hammond First is a little bit different because those congregations are actually becoming one congregation. But I guess when it comes to the idea of being on the same page, knowing that you want to accomplish the same objective, and sharing ownership, not just asking for help and come do it my way, but let's work together and make this happen, I think would be the key things.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thanks for that. Bob, you said in Middlebury you're looking to start something. Any specific questions that you wanted to ask or ideas you wanted to share? And if not, Dorothy, I was wondering if you could tell us more about Open Door and what that is in Napanee. If you're willing to unmute and tell us more about that program. Just hit the unmute button on the lower left. There you go.
Yeah, it was started by Napanee United Methodist Church. It's in the old station, train station, and it involves different congregations now, but it's open, I think, from, I haven't really directly worked with them, so it's open, I think, 2 or 3 days a week in the morning. I'm not sure. And they can come in and choose what they want, and I think get a box every so often. Yeah, and we have a grocery cart in our church that people can give things in. Yeah, it seems like we haven't been getting. I haven't seem like we haven't emphasized it like you used to. We used to get, quite a few things every week, but it seems like since COVID, we haven't really kind of got back with it like we should have with that. We used to have we called the Million Can March, where we canvassed the whole community. But again, that hasn't come back either. So, we just, these are good ideas that we need to kind of get back, getting somebody else. We changed to one board, and I hope that we can get somebody that's really interested in starting that up again, and kind of doing those kind of things. So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Dorothy, that you have about things you're interested in doing at Napanee or outreaches that you're thinking about?
We like to collect things for different organizations. Seem like our congregation gives best when you collect things, and so we collect some things, and we're collecting right now for women, and we're going to give it to Broadway Christian Parish and things. Get the kind of 2 years ago we did underwear for men, and last year we did diapers, and so this year we're working on women. So it's kind of interesting how it goes. Yeah.
That's wonderful. We appreciate your support. So thanks for doing that, because we rely on those donations that come in, help us be able to care for others.
Thank you.
Bob, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to talk a little about Middlebury, what you're thinking about?
Well, we have a lot of extra rooms in the church that aren't being used, and so I just wanted to learn some more about what it would take to start something. And I haven't really talked to anyone, but just having something that gets people involved in ministry, I think would be good. So I appreciate all the information you guys have sent.
Yeah, what do you think are some of the passions and interests of your members that they might want to try to use as a way to outreach to others in the community?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of gardeners in ours and farmers too. And so, it's interesting. Half of our county and even Middlebury area are Amish, and they're pretty much self-sufficient. At least we think that. I don't know for sure. Maybe if you'd open up a food pantry, you might be surprised how much they would use it. But at any rate, but I think people in our church would like that. We really don't have at this particular point just like an ongoing ministry that just keeps moving like a train. We just don't have one of those, and I think a food pantry might be a good start for that.
Yeah, it could definitely help meet a need. And an important thing to also do is think about what are the other food pantries that might be in your area already that people are going to, and is there a need for more? Another thing I'll mention, you think about unused space, is finding other partner organizations that you can work with. So, for example, at River Park UMC here in South Bend, they're hosting a group in one of their unused rooms called Busy Hands. That's knitters who knit blankets and clothing, quilts, and it's a wonderful program that needed a place to go as the food bank actually was expanding, and they used to be in that building. And so they found that as a way to be able to host a group that had a service and a collaboration with the community. And so sometimes as we talk about networking, it's looking to see what are agencies that may be looking for space. And as churches, we have that opportunity to provide space for people to meet and gather. I've talked about substance abuse, and I know Broadway does Narcotics Anonymous groups, and I know First UMC in South Bend has a recovery cafe that they host and AA meetings. And so sometimes that's another way that we can partner and serve our community and think about outreach. One of the interesting things I've seen with NA at Broadway is they really want to be separate. They're not looking to build a connection with our congregation and community, that they're really just looking for a room to rent. And so that's maybe not been the best thing for a place that wanted to start outreach to do. And then the other thing I'll just mention is you think about space, and especially coming out of the pandemic, with us feeling so isolated all of the times, is having community spaces where people can go, whether it's for a cup of coffee or whether it's for just a place to hang out and connect with other people. Having places to do that sometimes can be limited in our communities, or require paying a lot of money. And so if churches are maybe seeing that need, and there's people who are passionate about connecting with other people and building relationships, just having a community room that people can come to can be a big help. One of my previous churches here in South Bend was Epworth Memorial, that had a clothing pantry for a number of years, but was really struggling to connect with the people who are coming in. And so they opened a coffee room in one of the other unused Sunday school classrooms. And it became a place for them to be able to sit down with people before or after they were shopping, they'll talk and get to know them better. They'd have puzzles and games there, things for the kids to do so that kids could play games and do activities while their parents or adults were shopping. And so that was a helpful way that they try to build more of a relationship, because they were trying to not just serve the community, but also connect with people and try to build that spiritual connection. And so having time together and having a casual environment to do that in really helped us at Epworth to be able to do that. So I just sure there's another idea of a way to do outreach that's more than just a food pantry, more than just meeting a physical need, but like we've talked about, trying to find ways to build a relationship.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any questions or things that they want to ask about before we wrap up? Joyce, you'll need to unmute. Hit the microphone button on the lower left. There you go. Oh, we can't hear you though. Can you hear her, Sean?
No.
Yeah, no, sorry, we can't hear you, Joyce. Your microphone may not be working. If you're comfortable chatting, you can type in the chat box. If you click that on the bottom on chat, you can type your question. But otherwise, sorry, that's not working. Anything else, Sean, that you wanted to share about before I ask you to close in prayer?
I guess the one final thing I will mention, because it hasn't come up in any other way, is I know United Methodist churches in general tend to be somewhat aging congregations, but I don't think that should stop us from reaching out into the community and serving them. I know most of our volunteers are retired, because they have more time they'll commit to it. And so I don't think age is a limiting factor to what we can do. Now, I realize as people get older, what they physically can do may be lessened, but we all still can love God by serving others regardless of our age. So I don't think that should be the limiting factor to engaging in this work.
Absolutely. Very true. All right. Sorry, Joyce, your microphone isn't working. I'll put our emails in the chat so that if you have any, you or anyone else has any questions that they want to email us, we'd be glad to follow up with you to do that. But Sean, will you close us in prayer then as we wrap up?
Absolutely. Let us pray. Good morning, God. We do give you thanks for this day that you have created and blessed us with. And God, we are thankful for the opportunity to serve you. I lift up to you the churches that are represented in this Zoom room right now and the communities those churches are in. And God, I pray that your Holy Spirit would work through these churches, that you would empower the members of those congregations to be your hands and your feet. May they serve the needs of those around them. And in doing so, may they make your love known. Through them, may you transform the world and make new disciples. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.